Okay, is this working? Yes, it's working. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us for this lunchtime panel on the pressure of modern life. I think we all have quite a lot to say about this topic, and also it sort of forms the basis for everything that we do in our lives. So we see that there's a lot of interest in this session, which is very good. So, without further ado, let me first of all introduce our session panelists today. Starting from my left, we are joined by Jennifer Bruno. She is the Vice President of Global Health Services for Johnson & Johnson. We all know Johnson & Johnson, of course. She has been devising strategy and service delivery for the 130,000 employees of Johnson & Johnson in 60 countries is it around the world. So she's really looking after the Johnson & Johnson people there, right? Okay, so that's Jennifer Bruno. And we'll keep our applause for after I introduce everybody. And next to Jennifer is Irad Eichler. Is that how I pronounce it? Okay, thank you. He is from Israel. He's the founder and chairman of Shekulov Tov Group, which is a leading Israeli organization that has been working to incorporate people who have been left behind in the workforce for many reasons, incorporating them back into the workforce in a very inclusive sort of environment. So we're very happy to have you here with us also. And then next to Irad is Piep Peterson. He is the president of the most influential trade union in Estonia, the Estonian Trade Union Confederation. So he has been credited with forming some very strong union work. And so we're very happy to have you here so we can hear from the union side of the perspective as well. And next to Piep, we have Patrick Van Kessel, who hails from the United States. He does some very interesting work. He is a senior data scientist at Pew Research Center. He has told us straight from the beginning that he will be taking no sides today. He works on projects on data-focused technologies and methods. And you've done all kinds of work involving what? Drug trafficking and political opinions and whatnot. So we're very interested in hearing what you have to the data that you have to share with us today. All right, so these are the panelists we have today. First of all, this session, what are we going to be talking about in this session? We have this great panel of speakers. So what are we going to be picking their brains on this afternoon? Obviously, we all know, we all have our smartphones or our phones with us today. We're all hyper connected. We are driven each day in our workplace, in our personal lives. We know how everything is sort of merging together. There is no way to separate our lives, our personal lives from our work anymore, although we try. And more, I think employees, companies, governments are realizing that this is a reality that is here to stay, that we have to come up with a new paradigm where we're more empathetic to the condition that all of us as human beings, as women, as men, as fathers, as mothers, as daughters, as sons, that we face on a daily basis. So, today we're all here to see what sort of direction we should be heading towards to make sure that we are creating an environment in our personal lives and in our jobs where it's sustainable, it's viable, and we're taking care not just of our physical well-being, but our mental well-being as well. But when we talk about our mental well-being, we find that more and more the issue of loneliness is a serious issue. And we all know, I think it was last year that the UK actually, Theresa May, Prime Minister Theresa May, actually appointed a Minister of Loneliness, right? I come from Korea, South Korea, where this was a fantastic idea because people were saying, yes, we need something like that. But nobody has taken the initiative. And we find that, wow, that's very interesting what they're doing in the UK. That's certainly something that we need to explore in the future, but not yet. We're busy with other things, you know? So I think that's the general consensus now. We realize that this is such an important factor that's going to be affecting such a large portion of the workforce. And yet, we feel that we're not quite ready to tackle these issues as they are, right? So we're going to be starting off with one poll. We're going to be having two polls today over the course of this session, but let's start with the first poll. We encourage you to use the app, the Bcast, to participate in this poll. So we're going to be sharing with you how the people in this room, and also I believe people can join this poll online as well, where we see, you know, how we feel about this issue of loneliness. Do you feel lonely? And do you feel that more people around you are feeling lonely? So please participate in that poll. And I will announce the results a little bit later on, right? So let's begin today by starting off with this issue of loneliness because Patrick, I believe, has done a study in the United States on this issue of loneliness, and you have some data to share with us, right? Let's start off with you. I mean, are Americans feeling lonelier? How is it? You want to take your mic?
Minor detail. So again, the caveat, I'm from Pew Research Center, so I have no opinions of my own. But I'm a data scientist and I bring data. So obviously these are going to be very American-centric because that's where the surveys were conducted, but I'm hoping that, you know, given all the trends in globalization and the spread of technology and everything, they're still relevant and can be instructive to the audience, both, you know, from the United States as well as internationally. The two surveys that I think I'm probably here for are surveys that I did last year on the meaning of life. Obviously, this is an ambitious thing to study. So we took two different approaches. First, we used a traditional survey measure where we asked people to go down a list of 14 different sources of meaning and rate how much meaning it gave to them. The other approach that I was more involved in was an open end, where we literally just asked people, tell us in detail what makes your life feel meaningful, fulfilling, and satisfying. And people responded very enthusiastically. One respondent sent us a 14-page response via email afterwards. The average person wrote 40 words, like a paragraph. And there are a lot of really rich quotes from this data set. So I think we'll be displaying some that are relevant and that reflect sort of the voice of the average American throughout this panel. But we also used algorithms to go through and extract the main themes from the text, and we identified 30 different themes. And between the two different surveys, we saw a number of trends emerge. So family was obviously the most important source of meaning. 69% of respondents mentioned it. And after that, 34% mentioned their children, 34% mentioned their job or career, 20% their partner, and 19% their friends. But we also asked about a ladder of life. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how ideal is your life or not? And when we looked at the topics that were universally associated with that ladder of life, just 4 stood out. So this is regardless of your socioeconomics, your race, ethnicity, political and religious views. If you mentioned your friends, your work, your partner, or being in good health, you across the board had a boost in your overall life satisfaction. So I think to frame this discussion, friends are very important. One thing that did jump out, though, was community involvement, and that includes church, was mentioned only 7% of the time. Let's see. So in a couple of other surveys that we did, we found that 73% of Americans are generally somewhat or very satisfied with their social lives. On the ladder of life overall, 75% of Americans rate their lives as being a 5 or above a 5, so closer to their ideal than not. And 3% 3/4 of Americans also say that they're somewhat or very satisfied with their job. So generally speaking, things are pretty good. But there is this minority where things aren't quite as rosy. So in terms of social life and isolation, so only 26% of Americans are somewhat or very dissatisfied with their social life. 54% say that they have somebody they can turn to all or most of the time. Only 10% say that they feel isolated or lonely all or most of the time. But there are trends that we saw in both the meaning of life surveys as well as these others where socioeconomics is a major intervening factor. So 10% say they're lonely or isolated most of the time. That goes up to 16% for low-income respondents. On the meaning of life survey, we also saw that high education and high-income respondents were twice as likely to mention their friends compared to low-income and low education. So that's one area where we're seeing a bit of a divide emerge.
Okay, Patrick, you've given us a lot of numbers there, but generally we're seeing that, yes, people are feeling lonely, and we're also, we saw some of the responses already coming in, but generally speaking, I think a lot of people here are saying, I'm not lonely, but the people around me are lonely. But let's go to this video. We have a video presentation for you, a short video, about 2 minutes, where we're going to be seeing how young people these days are feeling about this issue of loneliness. So we'll get back to Patrick's points a bit later on, okay? Shall we start the video?
All right, to squeeze in, is that okay?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you very much.
Hiya. Hello. How's things today anyway, all right?
You on your lunch break? Is it a good sandwich? Was it as good as you were hoping for?
And more.
And more.
What's your name?
Andy,
My son's called Andy.
when you're having your snack, do you find many people talk to you? No. You're not a talker or? No, never have been.
Nobody talks to me because I'm old.
And have you tried the prawn sandwiches at other shops and then?
No.
Not going to risk it?
No.
No. I'm just having a chat with people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who are lonely in Britain. But if I said to you 9 million people in the UK were lonely, what would you say about that?
I find it incredible. I didn't realise it was as big as that. Something needs to change on this.
Making small connections every day is a way to help people combat loneliness. When normally you'd just be sat on your phone or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
If you can just have little moments talking about prawn sandwiches, chat's free.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you may have to give a little bit of your sandwich, you know, just a small amount. It's not going to happen.
I'm nearly 90, you know.
You look fantastic.
I know.
It's good to talk.
That's it. Yeah.
I feel like we're friends now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you get a chance to make those little connections, then that'd be, yeah.
I think I might just go for a little walk around at some point today
Yeah.
and actually say hello to someone.
I'd almost say it's been a pleasure.
Well, almost. Almost. You may see some people on my right-hand side who are now having a chat.
Yes.
Who weren't having a chat earlier.
I'm only just sat there impressing no one. Yeah, I recognise him, but I can't remember where it was from.
I don't know if you know, but that Andy is a very famous presenter in the UK. So anyway, that's just a very small little snippet to get us started again. But yes, it's those little connections that matter. And yeah, loneliness. So your final word on that issue of loneliness, Patrick, what do you think, based on all those numbers?
Well, generally speaking, a majority of Americans, at least, are at least somewhat satisfied with their social lives, but there is a minority that's not, and they tend to be lower income, less educated.
Okay, Ira, let me go to you now. You are working with people who have been left behind for many reasons, including psychiatric reasons, right? You help them to get back into the workforce, and obviously these people would would have been dealing with the issue of loneliness quite a lot, right? What have you seen in your line of work?
So yeah, we work mainly with people with disabilities, also mental health issues, and we are kind of the opposite, as opposed to looking at loneliness in the workplace. We work with people that are lonely and trying to get them, whether it's to the workplaces or other things in the community like leisure life and so on. And we found out that, first of all, using digital technology doesn't help as a solution. It could be something to assist the solution, but it's not the solution. And for us, we look at workplaces, we look at leisure, we look at all kinds of social activities as opportunity to get people back on the grid, because workplaces could be a great opportunity to deal with loneliness, to deal with isolation, and if we structure it right, it makes a difference for people's life. And what's amazing about this process, once you get someone that were lonely and were isolated with mental health issue into a workplace, you see ripple effects on his life in different places. For example, we had a woman that got support from us, and she haven't spoke with her family for 15 years. And after just 3 months in a workplace, she reconnected with her family. Her daughter got back in touch with her, and it was amazing. And then she met with her grandson and so on. So I think once you get human connection solved in one place in your life, in one area, that could really make a difference and influence other places as well.
So what you're saying is having a job sort of gives you maybe the means, the reason to forge the connections that maybe you have, not had before, right? Because of the issues that you've had. Because you're dealing with, Jennifer, you're dealing with so many workers in the Johnson & Johnson group of companies. You must see a lot of different cases of people grappling with issues, personal issues, that prevent them from really having the full life that they deserve. Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have to do anything. Okay, so I just want to comment, this really is the pressure of modern life. Everybody came in here and they're eating lunch in order to hear us, like trying to squeeze in as much as you can in a day. But I would offer that with 135,000 employees around the world in Johnson & Johnson, one of the things that's really very important to us is to create a culture where people feel like they belong. And so we are very fortunate to be grounded by the Credo in Johnson & Johnson. And one of the aspects of our Credo talks about our commitment to our employees to help them be healthy and to live a life with well-being. But it also is around helping support them in their responsibilities for their families. And so I would tell you that we try to bring our Johnson & Johnson family together. And just recently, we had a physical activity challenge. We've got a goal to be the healthiest workforce. And we had a physical activity challenge where we had more than 33,000 global employees sign up to take steps every day, to try and get to 10,000 steps every day. So 33,000 employees coming all together. What we used for that was technology. So we found that technology brought our global employee population together. People were tracking their steps. They were showing them on the app that we were using. But more importantly, they were posting pictures of the way they were getting their physical activity. And most of our employees were either engaging with other employees or actually finding themselves connecting with their family. So they took the challenge home with them, and they were now trying to get steps in with their spouse or their partner, or they were going out with their dog or playing with their kids a little bit more. So we found a way to take technology and actually help our employees be more physically active, but also to engage them and make connections across the business.
Now that's all good, but it mustn't I'm sure it wasn't always so easy to get in line and to say, okay, we're going to be really looking after our employees, because, you know, there's the argument that these are adults we're dealing with. You know, why do we have to babysit them like this? Isn't it their responsibility to take care of their own physical and mental well-being? Was there ever, I mean, you've been with Johnson & Johnson for the past 30 years or so, right? Was there that debate in Johnson & Johnson where people are saying, we're a company dedicated to making money, you know, this is not our issue, let us get on with our business? Did you witness that sort of debate within the company?
I would tell you that that debate has not been first and foremost part of our Johnson & Johnson culture, because when the company started more than 100 years ago, we actually were taking care of our employees back then. And so from an occupational health and safety perspective, we've always been taking care of our employees. Where we've broadened it more into the area of well-being and focusing on all aspects of mental well-being. From a U.S. perspective, that often ties back to our healthcare costs, and so there's a financial or an economic reason to focus on employees' health and well-being. I would tell you, outside of the U.S., we get way more of the pushback that you're referring to, which is, what's my employer get involved in my personal stuff? That's between me and my physician. I don't want my employer becoming involved in those things. That's private. That's my personal information, my personal life. But I think where we come from on this is really about creating a culture within Johnson & Johnson where being healthy and choosing health is easier to do when you work there, because your physical and your mental health are very closely together. It impacts your productivity. It impacts your ability to actually live into what our purpose is as a company.
Yes.
I want to make a comment here about the business case. As a civil society organization, I want to make the business case. When we approach companies, our case is not to feel pity about people or like to help people. We have a business case. People that last longer in the workplace, they care about the job, they keep them. And once the workplace care about the people or the employees engagement is higher, and they keep the workplaces. It costs five salaries to change an employee, and it costs a lot to workplaces. Workplaces want to invest in retention, employee retention, and I think the business case is really clear here. And where we see it is that once we have an employer that works with us, if they approach us for more employees, more candidates for jobs, that means that the former employee is successful and we've done a good job. And that's the business case, because workplaces do care about their employees, but they do care about the business results. And once it's aligned, it's easier to do it.
Okay, so it's a case of everyone working together, right? I want to go to you, Piep, because you've been working with trade unions who have obviously demanded changes to better care for these workers. What were some, can you tell us about some examples where issues that perhaps connect with loneliness or welfare were actually brought up to the surface, and where you experience improvement because from union demands?
I will start from the fact that I'm coming from Estonia, which is one of the most optimistic country about new technology, which means that we are taking everything on. We invented the Skype. Now Bolt is made actually in Estonia, and things like that. The invention is always there. The problem is that actually we hardly think what are the results, real results. It looks like really easy to take a taxi now. It looks like really easy to talk to the colleagues in the next city or something, or just in Australia for us on the backside of the world. But we are not thinking enough what is the result really for the workers. It has a kind of a feeling that, okay, you have the email, you have the messenger, you have now the Skype, you have everything to connect, but actually the problem is that you are still lonely. Now we need to look behind that. What's really happening is that you are getting so many kind of less meaningful contacts. You are wasting your time on that, and you are not really getting the personal, the touch which is needed to be a person, to be a worker, to be really, to feel yourself happy there. This is the main point, and then again, when the technology is changing and the work is really following you to the home, my personal experience, I'm playing with my son, and all of a sudden there's something on my phone, and then I'm distracted and doing something on phone, and then the second hand I'm playing something. Then actually, the quality time is not there anymore, because there's no strict point that, okay, now I left the work and now I'm fully for the family, and that means that actually people are not having to rest, and the constant information in your head, the new context, and you have less time for the friends. And when your friends are coming together, they are probably always checking if the mail has coming or something. The phones are always like this between the friends, basically.
Okay.
But I didn't answer the question.
Please do.
Have we done something? Yes, the unions are talking a lot about this question. We have very good examples in many countries where the unions have proposed good solutions, and they are in place. The idea that when you go home, you play with your kid. This is the point. We need the right to disconnect. We really don't want to see any emails, at least. And this is something which is actually very clear. The rest time is rest time. Family time is family time. The work time is work time. This has to be very clear. And the second thing, we need to monitor the mental health as closely as the physical health and the risks. So that's at the workplace. Our startups and IT companies have said that no, we nothing is iron here. We offer the yogurt and everything is fine, but we still have had very bad situation when kind of developer is gone mad and actually had really tragic results because of that. So please take care, and the unions are going to demand it from the government and also from the employers.
You brought up the issue of mental health, mental wellness, right? This issue, in my country, in South Korea, we've had several cases recently where people who were who sort of slipped through the cracks in the welfare system. They were suffering, they were lonely, they didn't have jobs, and they would lash out at really innocent people. A few weeks ago, we had an incident where a gentleman who was jobless, he felt that people were targeting him. He was mentally unhealthy. He lashed out at people in his apartment building, killing several people in the dead of night. What he did was he set fire, so the fire alarms went off, so people were running out, and he killed some of these people. Just very, very innocent people. So this is a tragedy where you have people who are not well lashing out at people who are absolutely not related to this person's personal issue at all, completely unrelated. And really sad to say, South Korea, as many of you may know, is the most connected country in the world. We now have 5G. I come to Europe and I find the internet is so slow, So we have this issue. Yeah. So we need everything to be fast. We're super connected, and we're, for us, there is no division between personal life and our jobs. Whenever we get something from our superior work related, we get to it straight away. We do it straight away. That's how a small, tiny country like South Korea became the 12th largest economy in the world. So we have that work ethic. But I think lots of people are suffering inside. They're not well. They're pressured, and mental issue. There's a strong stigma attached to it as well, because we come from an Asian culture where you don't talk about your mental issues. If you talk about your mental issues, you think, okay, that would be the end of me. I will not have a job. I will not get married. People will shun me, that sort of thing. Mental issue, that is obviously it's not something that people talk about openly, right? Jennifer, how is it at Johnson & Johnson? You have cases of people who are grappling with mental health issues, of course?
Yeah, we're no different as a global organization with having people grappling with mental health issues, and depression and anxiety are probably the leading causes of mental health issues right now in a global population much like ours. I would tell you some of the things that have been really very interesting is you can put as many programs and resources out there, but unless people are willing to identify that they need some help. 60% of a population in a recent study that was done through the Harris poll say that they have mental health issues, but they've never told their employer. They don't want anybody at work to know that they're experiencing an issue like that. And so allowing people to find access through tools that may be online, right, or be a confidential 24/7 telephonic counseling and coaching, using video Skyping is also very helpful. But I will tell you the two things that we've found to be most impactful right now in our J&J population is we have an employee resource group. Well over 1,000 employees in 21 different countries that have come together around mental health. And we actually call them the mental health diplomats. They're not clinicians. They could be any of us here in this room. They're people that care about mental health. And they come together as a community and reach out and talk about mental health. They make it a normal conversation, just like you might talk about physical activity or what you ate for the weekend or what movie you saw. They've made talking about mental health a very normal part of everyday conversation, and that helps encourage other people to feel comfortable bringing this up. What we've also started to do is we have many of our leaders who are willing to share their mental health story. And so whether it's personally what they've gone through or somebody in their family or somebody that they know, when people start talking about it, when they keep the conversation alive, when they make it safe for people to bring these types of stories up and bring them to work, and you see there's no negative impact, it makes it easier for people to feel safe at work and to be able to reach out and get the help they need.
Okay. Irad, do you feel that, regarding this mental health issues, have we progressed? Have we made some progress from, let's say, 10 years ago? Somebody with a mental issue 10 years ago would feel a little more comfortable speaking about it now, do you think?
I think definitely. I think we are in the middle or in the peak of a revolution regarding mental health and people with disabilities. I think the world is changing. I think talking about diversity, talking about disabilities, me being here on this stage talking about it, I think that's we are in the middle of a revolution. And I think if we would look back at other big human revolutions, like with women, like with gay people, like with black people, I think within a decade or so, we would look back in terms of mental health and in terms of people with disabilities, and we wouldn't know what the fuss was about. We realized that people with disabilities, people with mental health, at the end of the day, 20% of the population of the world have disabilities. At the end of the day, somewhere between anywhere between 20 to 30% of people are suffering with mental health issues. And at the end of the day, every one of us during their life experiencing issues of mental health. Whether you get, whether you have gone through a personal crisis like divorce, or whether you are going through, you have an adolescent daughter like myself, and she has her first boyfriend, that's really a mental health issue for a man. And so that's part of our life, and we have mental health issue. And to be honest, like I felt lonely when they started dating. I felt lonely, and once I spoke with other parents, especially fathers, I realized that I wasn't alone there, and that made me feel really good about it. So I think we are in the middle of a revolution. I think we are all part of it, and I think when we will look back, we would be proud that we were part of it.
Okay.
So can I respectfully disagree?
Yes, please do.
Not on the
About the daughter
not
thing?
on the daughter thing. Not on the daughter thing. I completely understand that. I would hope that we're on the middle of a revolution. I don't think we're quite as far along as we need to be. I really don't. I think that we want to be, but I don't think we are. I think back to people with mental illness. You run the other way when you see a homeless person on the street because most likely they have some type of mental illness and you're afraid of them. And we're afraid to have conversations about mental health. And it's something we can't see or truly understand. And I think about employees who have gone out for depression or anxiety or bipolar. They come back to work and their boss doesn't know what to say. Do they say, "How are you? Are you okay?" If I had surgery, everybody would be sending me emails saying, "Oh, I hope you feel better. Can't wait till you come back." But we don't treat somebody that with a mental illness or a mental health issue the same way we do with somebody that has a physical illness. And so I want us to be where you're at, and I'm hopeful, but I think we have to come together as a global community in order to truly make that happen within the next decade.
Okay, great point. Yes, Pete.
I must say that the Estonian government discovered that there's a huge problem with mental health just recently. It was after they had this reform, workability reform, where they tried to help people disabled people back to work. And yes, physical problems, they were easy to manage. But there was, I think it was a second group of disabilities. It was the psychosocial problems, and really you don't have a really good solution for these. And this is the biggest rising group of problems. And actually you can't be successful as a society when very big part of your society is actually dropping out to nowhere. And to answer it, I really hope to get your visit the cards afterwards, so I can make some connection that our government could learn from you. So actually, this is kind of invisible problem, and I must say that maybe we are still discovering it, and we should do it in an international way so that we can learn from each other.
Mm-hmm. How serious do you feel that issue is? I mean, you were saying it's growing quite dramatically, right, within the workforce in Estonia. Yeah.
It is actually quite a big version, because yes, you have these connections, but you don't notice if you're not really a face-to-face situation, then actually you don't recognize the problem, you can't react, you can't help your colleagues, and this loneliness in a digital world, actually it creates this kind of falling out. And what is important for us as trade unions, yes, we want to have these people who had this illness back to workforce, but more important is to prevent these problems, to learn what is causing these problems and what we can do. And this is absolutely needed, that this is not only that the employers are thinking about that, but actually they are having dialogue, social, informed dialogue about these questions, and these questions are coming to regulations also the best solutions.
Okay. Before I go to Patrick for more insight and perspective, I wanted to share with you some figures. Mental health problems are now, according to the World Health Organization, is affecting about 700 million people around the world. That's like 1/10 of the population, right? And it seems depression is set to become also the second leading cause of disability by next year. It's right in our faces, right? And again, another statistics by the OECD this time. The total cost of mental illness is 3.5% of the GDP of Europe alone. So that's a huge figure. I mean, there is no way we can turn our faces away from this issue anymore. So Patrick, I don't know if you've done research in this area with Pew, where you look at mental issues and how it is affecting the workforce and how it's affecting maybe the bottom line, or
Yeah, so I haven't personally, but I scoured all of our reports, and there was actually a couple that we did in the past year that are particularly relevant. First, I'm really glad that you brought up adolescents, because that is a group where these issues are very salient. A recent report that we did found that 70% of American teenagers are concerned about anxiety and depression among their peers in the community and where they live. Now, when you talk to them about their own issues, they're less pronounced, but so I was seeing a lot of responses to the poll about, well, I'm not lonely, but I feel like everybody else is, and that's the sentiment that American teenagers seem to share. When you ask them about their own lives, 40% say that they feel bored every day or nearly every day. 29% say they feel tense or nervous about their day. And another 29% say that they wish they had more good friends every day or almost every day. So these are, I can't speak to whether or not these are alarmingly high or abnormally low statistics. We don't have a trend on it, but it's clear that these issues are very salient to American teenagers in particular. When it comes to the workforce, we've been talking a lot about the impact of technology. And an interesting statistic that pops out to me is 39% of American workers say that technology has made their work more demanding, while only 29% say that it's made it less demanding. And when we're talking, along the lines of, being busy and stressed in general, 52% of Americans say that they feel like they're trying to do more than one thing at a time, nearly always. 12% say that they feel like they're too busy to enjoy life all or most of the time, and 11% say that the fast pace of their life feels like it's harming their health. So, not majorities, but there's definitely, a lot of trends related to these different issues that are percolating up in, segments of the population.
I see. So the young suffering in this day and age. It's interesting because Anne Frank, in her diary of a young girl, said, "Deep down, the young are lonelier than the old." This was her perspective back then. All right. Now, we want to go to that the BCAS poll that we did and look at some of the reaction that we got. Can we put that up on the screen? I think, some of you have responded. Let's see. So do you feel lonely? Do you see more people around you who are lonely? What do we have? Okay, yes, we have yes, no, so lonely. Goodness. Sometimes, yes, lots of it, and people assume it's the new normal, and it's not. So not really. I'm worried about the amount of young people feeling lonely, and some places even reaching the same level as the older generation. I'm not lonely, but elderly people around me are lonely, and they say that they feel very lonely too. So it's a mix, but generally, I think this issue of loneliness, we are all aware of now. I may not be lonely, but yes, there are people around me who are lonely. Are these the results we have? Is there more? Okay. 19 results. Okay. We have a comment here. In France, there isn't even a term for what, mental health or mental health, yes. So this is still a very pioneering field, so to speak, right? Okay, so that was our first BCAST poll. Generally speaking, people realize that this issue is there and that we need to do something about it. So loneliness, that's going to be tackled in some manner, still starting off. But regarding mental illness, now we've identified the problem. Now, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do? I mean, is there a successful case story that you have from Johnson & Johnson? I mean, mental issues. How do you make sure someone who's suffering doesn't go unnoticed or isn't suffering alone? Is there a program at Johnson & Johnson that you have?
So there is a program, and I think our program has been very successful, but I would actually raise an issue that is not even a program. I think it really is about having empathy and looking at somebody when you sit around the break room with them or sitting in a meeting with them or pass them in a hallway and actually say, how are you? How are you doing? When people hear you ask and you actually take a moment to hear their response and make a connection with them, very similar to what we saw about loneliness, empathy has a huge impact on somebody's willingness to actually share how they're feeling and that they may be down or they may be lonely or feeling overwhelmed. And when that happens, you have the ability then to remind people of the resources that are there, to remind them that somebody does care about them and that there is an employee assistance program that's available 24/7 and it's completely confidential for an employee and for their family members. But that empathy and just asking somebody how they are doing, I think is a really important part of the solution, and that's something that all of us can do.
Is that a particular position, the responsibility of a particular position, or are you saying we need to have a culture of empathy that everyone partakes in?
I think we need to have a culture of empathy.
Is that easy, though?
Oh, I don't think it's easy, especially when people are feeling so busy and I've got emails to check and text message to check and a job to do and a family to take care of and an elderly parent and a teenage daughter and I forgot about my own health today. I think it's very hard to be empathetic. We're so quick and we're at such a pace that we don't take the time to just say, how are you?
So if that's the case, I mean, aren't we lost, you know? Yes, Peep.
Trade unions always like this systematic approach, and we really think that this empathy is very important. But just to make this empathy really work at the workplace, you need to think about when you have the time, what is the way to do it, and that's why we are saying that yes, the training of managements absolutely needed, the training of workers also needed to understand what's happening and when the colleague is under pressure, what to do. This is absolutely important. Then actually thinking about, for example, the office, how the office is built, that the people really do come together somewhere, they have to chat to each other, things like that. They are absolutely needed. In Europe, I must say that actually these discussions are going on. One starting point for that was 2004 framework agreement between European social partners, the Business Europe and the European Trade Union Confederation, and quite many governments actually took this and started to talk about it. What is the problem exactly? And it has come to many national legislation pieces or to some collective agreements, and led to, and this kind of discussion is helping a lot because then actually more and more people are involved and it is getting systematic and it's really helping to stop at least this growth, because actually, you know, the technologies is new technologies coming on and then it's really hard to stop these tendencies, but we need to try.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I want to share about some of our experience, because we start or we work with people with disabilities, but we work in workplaces. So we work in 3 levels. The first level is the campaign level, so change management. And the way we do it is we have people with life experience, like transgender, or like a woman with experience of mental health, that they go and they speak with the teams, they speak with the management level, and they tell their life stories. And by telling their life stories and sharing their experience and sharing practical tips to the management, it helps the management in their daily life to confront and to manage and to deal with issues that rise up. The second level is the direct manager level. So we work with direct managers that employ people with mental health issues, because we've seen in researches that the first reason or the leading reason for people to leave their job is the relationship with their direct manager. So we invest a lot in the relationship between the direct manager and the people that we place in the workplace. And we use technology as well to do it. We use a WhatsApp group for it's a triangle between the employee, the manager, and our supported employment expert. So we do, for example, WhatsApp groups to help them communicate together, so they're on their daily challenges. And the third level is the support level, where we support employees that, for example, we have a platform for online support group that is dedicated for people that got placed in a workplace. It's anonymous, so they can join in for a group that deals with stress, deals with the relationship with the manager, deals with relationship with peers, and so on. Deals with the first 3 months. For example, if you, it's one of the biggest challenges the first day at a job. When you walk in, it's so threatening with people with mental health issues. They're walking into the door. So we have a special groups that support them during the first 90 days in order to get them that they know that someone is backing them. So on those 3 levels, we deal in terms of mental health in the workplace.
Okay. Now, listening to Irad's perspectives, I'm wondering, what got you to do this in the first place? I'm wondering, yeah.
Ooh, I never know how to answer this question, but to be honest, I think it relates to loneliness, because I was looking for something that is meaningful. I was looking to do something in life that means something to someone else, but not just making the internet quicker, which means something to someone. But I mostly look at the bottom of the pyramid and looked at people that are at the bottom of the pyramid and help them make their life better. So that's what started me going. Yeah.
Related to this mental issue, I want to go to Patrick again. Patrick, at Pew Research, you are obviously you don't take sides, but you would be looking at policy recommendations, perhaps, to make to governments, at how to help people with mental issues or these issues that are pulling them back from technology advancements and whatnot. I mean, is there a line that Pew takes? Like, yes, this is the line that the governments need to tackle, or this is what we need to focus at more?
No comment. No, but to your point, about what can we do. I can simply point again at the findings that we had in the survey, that regardless of who you are, if in the moment you're asked, what makes life feel meaningful, and the things that pop into your head are your friends, your romantic partner or spouse, your job and career, or being in good health, you're probably more satisfied with life. Those are 4 areas where a little bit of work might be able to help lift some people up. Along the lines of social media, I'm seeing some things pop up here on the Beatcast, I think, and social media is mixed. We find that we did a survey of social media users a couple years ago, or last year, I think. And we found that 71% of social media users regularly see content that makes them feel connected. Well, whereas 49% say that they regularly or sometimes see content that makes them feel depressed, and 31% said the same thing about content that makes them feel lonely. So there's more connection than loneliness on social media, but both exist. As to what you do with that information, I have no opinions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an irony because, we can connect to anybody around, near or far, we can connect to them. And at the same time, it sort of increases that sense of being not with it, not being in the in crowd, so to speak, which is generally what a lot of the millennials or the younger generation will be feeling. But the trade unions in this area, I mean, obviously we've been talking about how you've been tackling this issue. What is their core demand at this point in time, would you say?
I think this is the building the systems which are really helping to avoid the problems or reduce the risks. And that's why we are saying that this assessment of every workplace, according to the work-related stress, is absolutely needed. The discussion about the results is absolutely needed. A very clear plan how to reduce the risks is absolutely needed, and afterwards you need to also control or check if this is done. This is actually basically it's the same system as it been with the risk, physical risks, but now actually we need to broaden the scope and then start doing with this. And the second part is of course when these risks are you can minimize them, but you never can bring it to zero. Then actually somebody is going to be hit anyway. And you need to create the culture which is actually welcoming these people back when they went through some treatment, and this culture is also very needed. So actually, yeah, a system which is kind of a mechanism which is helping, but also the culture, general culture, that we know that the risks are, that people are getting hit, and the people are still very much wanted to come back and be part of the society.
If I may have a follow-up question to that. From the trade union's perspective, do working hours, is it related, would you say, to reducing those risks, both physical and mental?
I think with working hours, there are actually two different things. One is the working hours at the workplace, in a factory. We see that quite many workers sometimes want to work more. Some people want to work less, and actually it has to be kind of flexible, but under control. It can't be the way that somebody is asking for longer hours, and it is actually absolutely crucial for everyone. So actually there are people who need to work less, and there are people who can work a little bit more. There's one point, but the second is still what I said already. We need to make very clear distinction between the work time and the rest, because this being in a half is the one which is actually really tiring up the people, and then they are going to be burned out. It's very, very clear that, okay, at home, at vacation, please, the phone is not needed, or the email out, because your head needs to rest.
Yeah. Peep just brought us to this point about work-life balance, right? Where, in Korea, we have termed this new word. It's not a Korean word, but from work, life, and balance, we have formed this word called 워라밸. Work-life balance. So everyone talks about 워라밸, work-life balance, But this is a relatively new term that we started using about 2 years ago, and everybody talks about it. All the young generation, especially the young generation, when they're given a task, they will turn it into a 워라밸 issue, and they'll say, this doesn't work. In terms of work-life balance. So it's a relatively new term for us, but obviously it's something that we all need to focus more on. Of course, at Johnson & Johnson, you've been working with looking at the work-life balance issue, of course.
So, I would tell you that I'm not from that generation that talks about the work-life balance from the perspective that you're talking about the young people. I come from many years at J&J, where I would tell you that there's no such thing as work-life balance. Sometimes work takes the priority, and then sometimes life takes the priority, and you're going to constantly be swinging through that pendulum of life. That's how I personally look at it. But what I would tell you is, I think it's really important is to let employees feel that they've got a certain amount of ability to make some of those decisions. But then there's times that they don't. And what I mean by that is by the way the business is operated and the things that are going on there and the production that needs to be done, there's things that the business has to be able to help with. So I look at it that there's assessments that we do on the individual level so that people can understand their own personal risks related to their mental well-being and their work-life balance. But then there's organizational assessments that we need to do. and understand the impact the organization is having on people. And if I give an example of one of our businesses in Japan, after doing their annual stress check, what we found is that our employees were staying very late at night, 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. That was very culturally appropriate. You don't leave until your boss leaves. And so we started a program there called Switch. And one of the elements of Switch is the lights go out by 8 o'clock and everybody goes home. 8 o'clock. By 8 o'clock, right? That was hard for me, by 8 o'clock, right? And so in order to make Switch happen and everybody goes home by 8, no meetings were allowed to be scheduled after 5:40. Another element of Switch was there were Happy Fridays. Once a month, everybody went home at 3 o'clock. So people knew that they were doing that. Another thing we put in place to make part of this was when people had annual leave, their manager encouraged them to make sure they took their annual leave. We have many people, and I'm sure here, that leave your vacation time, your holiday time, your annual leave on the table. It's meant for you to take a break, to get that work-family balance, and to be able to come back to work with more resiliency and with better focus. The other thing we did as part of Switch were no emails after 10 o'clock at night. Again, 10 o'clock, you should be in bed or spending some time with your children or your partner or your spouse. But after 10 o'clock, no emails were allowed to go out or come in. And so there's timers that you can use and technology that will enable that to happen, because if somebody saw an email pop up, that fast-paced, sense of obligation, I'm going to respond to my boss or whoever sent that to me. And so people were not taking the kind of break that they need. And one of the last elements of all of this was really around spending some time each month on doing something that was creative and innovative and fun, even if it's just an hour in your job, so that you take yourself away from the day-to-day and have a chance to be creative and feel more engaged and more energized. So that's something that we did that worked for the culture in Japan. But recognizing that work-life balance, while we all want it, there are different things regionally, country-specific, and culturally that need to be addressed as well.
Okay, great point. Now, listening to all our speakers voice in on these issues, we want to go to BCAS poll number 2 now. And the question for this one is, so are stress and burnout the new health and safety risk at work? What do you think? Is it? Or, well, it's just very simple. Yes or no, right? So, oh, yes, 100%, yes. Okay, anyway, well, we'll let this poll run for a little bit. Okay, 3 answers, 100%. Okay, we'll let that run for a couple of minutes now. All right. I'm glad you mentioned the case with Japan, because that is the same thing that's happening in Korea now, except Korea likes to do things very, very quickly. We like to, we have the highest rising divorce rates in the world, when before nobody, it was like once you're married for life. But now things are changing so quickly. And so the workplace is also changing very quickly. Now, what happens is, at government-funded or government-run companies, the computers just switch off at 6. You can't do anything at 6 anymore. Even the lights go off at 6. And if you want to stay and do some extra work, you need to go through a ton of paperwork, with your manager that allows you to stay and work. But in the midst of this, what happens is you find that some people actually abuse the system. There are cases of that where they'll do the work very, very slowly, come 6 o'clock, out the door, I'm not here anymore. Have you ever seen cases where people are actually abusing that sort of new environment of recognizing this work-life balance issues?
So, in terms of our organization, now I'm talking about as an employer, I think it's a matter of how do you approach your employees. So I think it's not for me to testify, but I think that we have a really balanced work-life balance in our company. Some of us leave at 3 or 4. I do go spend time with my children. And I think it's all about how do you structure the relationship with your employee in terms of like how much responsibility do you give to him from one hand, and the other hand, how much freedom do you give him to execute this responsibility. And I think the way you structure the dialogue about the responsibility from one hand and the execution and the freedom to execute on the other end is really important in terms of like the balance that the person feels about what he's doing. So I think when you look at work-life balance, it's a bigger picture, because you need to speak about the balance that you create in the relationship you have with your employee. And I think everyone of us that works in a workplace, that you feel engaged, that you feel committed, that you care about the cause, that balances everything. And vice versa. In your family, again, if you feel balanced in your family, that you have the space, the freedom to do whatever you want to do in your work, and you have the freedom, and you're backed in terms of your life in work, that balances everything. So I think I answered the flip side of what you asked, because you asked about people taking abuse, but I think that's maybe the answer of abusing.
I think Irad is a very empathetic boss, and I would love to have him as a boss. Yes, Peep, you would have to add. You have to add to this issue.
So I wanted to say that actually just turning out the lamps it's not enough, because actually there's also the way we organize the work. There are also companies which are actually just changing old staff because the old one was burned out, and they are just bringing new people, and so constantly. Amazon is one of those. They are opposing this company very much and trying to change the system. But what I wanted to say is that actually we are very much in depending on deadlines. There are many deadlines. The deadlines usually don't come in a decent way. They just come in one moment, all of them. There's one question, how to divide work between the workers. Then the question is that actually we are getting new responsibilities. We are quite often not fit to take these responsibilities. We need some training. You are actually working in the field which is not yours exactly. This is the second thing, and actually there's much more. So actually that's why we are saying that we need to have constant dialogue, constant kind of understanding. Where are the problems? Sometimes people are not able to say exactly yes. They're first of all saying, I'm not feeling well. Then you start asking what is exactly, and then maybe you discover with something new which is not mentioned here today. That's why the dialogue is absolutely needed, and systematic approach, because otherwise we are just all burning out all the societies, and we are going go crazy.
All right. So I think, yes, communication is key to making sure that we identify really what the problem is. We are looking at the results of the second BCOS poll, and it was 100% before, but now we have about 19% saying, no, stress and burnout is not the new health and safety risk at work. So we want to open up this session to comments from the floor, and I think this is a good point to do so. Please, if you have your question, raise your hand. And yes, gentleman in the middle, could we give him the mic? Could you identify yourself briefly and share with us your opinion?
Fred Hoffman. I'm American, but have been in Paris for 30 years. I find it interesting that the approach, it sounds, is that everyone is working in the office. And there's been no mention of people working remotely or having flexible hours, because when you said turning off at 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night with the email being sent, etc. So I'm curious why that hasn't been talked about, and if you have some comments about it, working remotely and having other options.
Yes, Pete, would you like to address that question?
Yes, actually, there's a huge problem, and especially when we have this platform work. The Bolt drivers, basically, they don't know their bosses, they don't know the the colleagues, they can't chat and talk about the problems. They don't have any system to how to protect them. This is actually the new world is that yes, in old companies, it's possible to bring together the staff, to organize them, to create the dialogue. The problem is with the platform. There are platforms which are actually to do some coding work for Indian company from Estonia, which means that there's no human contact at all, and this is actually a huge problem. And even when we have this opportunity to work from home, people liked it in the first place very much. That oh really, I can be in my bed and work from there. They don't like it anymore, but sometimes actually they can't come back to the office because there's no office anymore, and these things like that. So that's why, yes, what we were talking here is easy for the classical situation, but for the new ones, we need to have a more wider discussion, including maybe we need some kind of regulation that really these bold people should know each other, at least to take contact and discuss the problems.
Thank you very much for bringing that point. Perhaps that could be a session at the OECD Forum next year, dedicated to the growing population of people working at home. Yes, you have a question? Yes. Could you identify yourself? And yeah.
Should I stand up like this thing? Yes, I'm Lucia from ADOS Global. We work with education a lot, and we are reskilling and upskilling programs. And I just wanted to raise 2 points and make a question. The first point is related to inequality and the fact that mental health is an issue that is not discussed when you're living in a country with high levels of inequality. And like you need to survive everything, so mental health is the least you can think of. And the second one is on that situation as well. Some countries face the possibility of up to 60% of the jobs existing being automated. So that creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of people not knowing what to do. So related to that, I wanted to ask if you have any best practices that you know or you would like to get to know more about the upskilling programs and the reskilling programs focused on mental health when the issue is to reconsider yourself in your life. Because most people, when they're going to be faced with the possibility of not having a job anymore, they have to rethink of themselves, and that's quite a crisis. So I don't think schools are preparing anyone for that. So when they are in the job market, they have to deal with that, and there's no clear responsibility about that right now. So what is your opinion on that?
Jennifer, do you think you could address it, or Irad? What do you think? Yep, Irad.
So one approach that we took is we did a digital profile for each one of our service users, and we basically looked at different various things that people can do online. Basic things like how to use text message, and more advanced things like how to open an email and use an email, and more advanced things like graphic design software and so on. So on that scale, you can create a digital profile for a person, and then once you have the digital profile, you can support him and let him learn things that he doesn't know. And by enriching your digital profile, your skills is changing, and the things that you can do are changing, and the job opportunities are open to you.
Your question, you started with the issue of inequality, right? Oh, are you talking about the gender inequality, or which? Economical, gender? Okay, yeah, Jennifer, regarding that issue of inequality, if we can just hone in on perhaps gender inequality, do you find that gender matters in terms of how people are able to more comfortably approach these issues of mental health? Is there a divide in terms of gender?
I think there is a divide. There's definitely is a divide, and women, while they may present with more issues, are less able to access care. men have less prevalence, but it's easier for them to access care. So it is a good point.
So sort of like when a man expresses his anger at work, he's being charismatic. When a woman expresses her anger, she's being, you know, whatever. I don't want to use the word, but yeah. So, okay, all right. Other questions from the floor? I think we have time for about one more. No? Don't be shy. Okay. Well, okay. Well, we have 5 minutes left, so I think we have time perhaps to come up with one policy recommendation or something you would like to see happen at the OECD, because after all, the OECD is about better policies for better lives. So I think we want to end this session by sharing one key thing that you would like to see happen at the OECD or addressed at the OECD. You know, for instance, the gentleman there is bringing up the issue of what about the people working from home, right? What would you say? Can we start with you, Jennifer?
So the one thing I would like to bring up, and it's probably bigger than a 1 minute, is I don't think the pace of the world is going to slow down, and I don't think stress is going to go away. I think that's where we're at. And so what I would like to see the OECD do is focus a little bit more on resiliency and how do we train people, how do we teach people to be more resilient in the times of stress so that when stress comes their way, they feel like they have the tools, the resources, the means to deal with the stress so that they're not acting out in an anger way, hurting other people, you know, harming themselves, you know, becoming addicted, but or suffering otherwise. I really would like to see the OECD focus on resiliency.
Okay, great.
For me, I think I would love to see the OECD doing is making more business cases for companies to understand that once you deal with mental health, once you deal with loneliness issues, once you hire more people with disabilities and with mental health issues, there are business cases that make sense business-wise, that to show businesses that to step out of their convenience zone a little bit, and it will make, and they will see results in the end. And there are use cases. It's not something that they need to even invent or encourage. It's just something you need to explore and to campaign with it.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to make a remark about this gender gap in these questions, and I would say that the men usually have, at least in our part of the world, have lower skills, social skills. So actually, they don't know what to do with what's happening, and they are not talking. They you know, it's not the part of the being a man talking about problems. Which leads to the fact that actually 80% of suicides are committed by men in Estonia, and the rate is quite high. It's shocking, but it's still quite high. So what I wanted to say about the OECD, first we need to make this problem visible, which means the collecting data, analyzing it, putting it into reports. It's absolutely needed. This makes it for governments something to talk about. And then secondly, of course, sharing the best practices is absolutely, you know, this is what the OECD usually does. It should be on the lists or focused better, yes.
So I can't make any policy recommendations, but what I can say is to the extent that loneliness, isolation, work-life balance, stress, technology, all of these issues are, you know, important and compelling, and they matter to policymakers. I think there's an opportunity to collect more data, as you just put, to get more granular, a more granular lens on the contours of these issues and the nuance. And you know, to the extent that you know, policymakers are looking to develop solutions to these problems, I would love to see more and more data, more and more facts on all of this.
Yeah, Yes, spoken like a true data scientist. Thank you. Well, I want to thank Patrick, Peep, Irad, and Jennifer for this very lively session on the pressure of modern life. It is here to stay, and we will obviously have to deal with it both personally and on the corporate level. But I believe the general message, the core message we have today is that we continue to communicate what the issues are and to be more open about it. So perhaps a couple of years from now, we will be able to speak more freely about these issues and to be more open so that we can come up with solutions that help us all. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being a part of this session. Thank you very much.